4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Thank you, and I will wait for the delay. It's like a 20-second delay. Just give me a 5 count, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay. I'm going to try another feed. Guys, we're still going to do another test. Mom's the word.
Hi, Lara.
Stand by.
Lara, your name.
Hey, Phil, I got your email.
Such good care of me. Oh, you're on.
I have to respond to emails one more time.
Call yours is already up.
Oh, cool, thanks.
So for the meeting,
It's called when you're at the head of the class.
oh, I like to go to the baby because my ex-husband had surgery on head driving over.
Guess what? It's you and me, babe.
Things are changing.
Yeah, he's gonna
Yeah,
be
so let
late,
me
so.
make sure that the date works.
Maybe we'll be over before we get there.
That's the idea.
I just had a crazy weekend.
We've got 2 articles?
How old are they again?
Guys,
He's doing-
I'm doing a YouTube test, so I want you to know we're gonna be live in 5 seconds. Could I have a count on YouTube?
What do you want?
Could I have a count, please, Joe?
5, 4.
Do a 10 count, please?
Okay, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4.5, 4, 3.75, 3. I'm doing disparate inflections, so for sound check.
Thank you.
3 and 2, 1.
Okay. I'm gonna bring the audio down.
That many myself.
Lucky.
All right, it's midnight in London, time to start the meeting. So, I'm Paul, I'm just filling in for John. So, I don't have any comments under the chairman's comments, so if it's okay with you folks, I'd like to get right into tonight's agenda. I believe, Phil, you want to come on up and talk about the article? Oh, Audrey, thank you. Come on in and say hello to the group.
Hello, group.
Names, please.
I'm Audrey Grace. I'm the first signatory on Article 28, the Citizens Petition.
Okay.
I'm sure Phil needs no introduction, and if
Oh, lay it on us, Phil.
this is Phil. He'll also introduce himself. I'm going to speak a little quickly on Article 28, then Phil's going to talk a little bit, and hopefully we'll leave time for questions if you have any. But I'm a member. I'm the communications director of the Walpole chapter of Action Together Western Norfolk County. And Action Together Western Norfolk County, along with the Walpole Peace and Justice, have presented the citizens petition named Article 28 in the fall town meeting warrant. This is an article in response to the recent events in Charlottesville and other instances of racial, religious, and ethnic intolerance made specifically by white nationalists and neo-Nazis in our country. And this behavior has left a lot of people wondering whether or not they'll be accepted in their towns and communities. So this is an attempt by we, the citizens of Walpole, to speak up and declare once and for all that such behavior is not welcome in our town. The violence in Charlottesville in the names of white nationalism and neo-Nazism, which led to the deaths of Heather Hare and 2 first responders, is unacceptable and should not be tolerated in Walpole. And I just want to point out that this is not necessarily meant to be controversial or political at all. In fact, substantially similar language, essentially a cut and paste, has been passed by a bipartisan group in the state. Other cities and towns have passed substantially similar language, and by a joint resolution of Congress, a same message has been passed by our federal government and signed by our president. So this is just Walpole's chance to make a statement for our citizens of Walpole. And so you might be asking, why should Walpole adopt something at this time? Well, I would say that Walpole has been in the news recently for certain xenophobic, racist, or bigoted activities by certain individuals in our town. And I just want to say that this is not the Walpole I know, or the Walpole that many of us know. The Walpole I know is one that a group of strangers came together and we decided to spread a message of love and acceptance. And I'm sure you may have seen around town our Hate Has No Home Here campaign. It has been extremely well received by, from Walpole Day, we had a table at Walpole Day, to we have a table at the farmer's market, and you can see the lawns and cars all around town that the people in Walpole do believe that hate has no home here. So I would say that the residents of Walpole are generally decent and welcoming people to live for people of all races, religions, ethnicities, and identities. But I think it's time for the surrounding communities and the state and the rest of the world to know that as well. So as a town, I think we need to make a statement that once and for all, that Walpole is a place for everyone. And such a public statement will not only be great for Walpole's reputation, but I think it will also be really good for business. We've seen recently that many businesses, such as Walmart, Apple, J.P. Morgan Chase, and Bank of America, and other companies have been willing to cut ties with certain communities that have engaged in discriminatory activity, discriminatory legislation. And I would think a statement like this is also good for our property values. People want to move to towns that are welcoming to everyone. And finally, and most importantly, I think this is just general human decency. We should, in all aspects of our life, I believe, denounce hate, discrimination, and bigotry wherever we see it. So therefore, I'm asking that the FinCom sign on to this article and send it with your approval to the town meeting.
And Philip Sharofsky. And just to add to that, and again, as Audrey said, this is really taken exactly what our state house passed. It's almost identical wording. The governor did a proclamation, again, almost identical wording. And as she said, our Congress did it. So it's really a bipartisan language. It should be acceptable to everyone. I think we all join in condemning the violence in Charlottesville, and our hearts certainly go out to those people, but it's important that all of us speak out. And I just want to refer to the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is very noted for its tracking of hate groups. There are 13 hate groups in Massachusetts that they're tracking, just to know. So it is around here. But even when there's not overt hate groups, whenever there's racism or prejudice or bias, wherever it is, and there's some in all communities, it's important that people speak out. So that's why it's incumbent for Walpole to make a statement, because even though the violence may be in Charlottesville, there's still, and we've got our actions here, it's important that everyone in the country speak out. So just to read a quote from the Southern Poverty Law Center: "Hate is an open attack on tolerance and acceptance. It must be countered with acts of goodness. Sitting home with your virtue does no good. In the face of hate, silence is deadly. Apathy will be interpreted as acceptance. If left unchallenged, hate persists and grows." So this resolution is really looking that we are going to add our voice to all the other cities and towns and government officials and other organizations in the country to be together united in speaking out against hate groups. And it's nothing to do with freedom of speech, because it does not prevent lawful, or does not infringe on anyone's right for lawful freedom of speech. But if somebody is using freedom of speech to have hateful messages, then it's up to us to condemn those messages. And that's really where we are. We need to condemn those messages. We need to make sure that we don't have an acceptance of hatefulness in our society. And I think that's one of the dangers, that these ideologies become normalized. It's part of the language. It's part of what we hear in news. So that's, again, why it's so important to be on top of this. So in passing this resolution, Walpole Town Meeting will be making an unequivocal statement disavowing the messages of bigotry and violence against individuals on the basis of their race, their ethnicity, their religion, their sexual orientation, and immigration status. And I think town meeting members, town officials, people of stature in the community all have an obligation to speak out, because those are the people that the community looks up to. So there is a special responsibility there when you have that position. So in closing, the Finance Committee has the opportunity for you to make the moral statement. And as specified by the Walpole Town Charter, you are the advisory board for town meeting on all subjects, not just financial subjects, but all subjects. So what you do tonight, if you give a favorable action, that will have an important example for town meeting, and it's going to be the right thing to do for our country, for our citizens, and for our town. So again, we join in asking you to vote favorable action on this motion.
Okay. Do we have any questions, comments?
Thank you, Acting Chairman. I just want to say that I'm so proud of Audrey Grace and the Action Together group, and Phil and the Walpole Peace and Justice group for making this happen. To me, it's a no-brainer. It's a layup, as well as it's extremely important. It's a no-brainer. It's a layup in that it's the morally right thing to do for reasons they outlined, and I think should strike your conscience and your soul and make you realize we need to condemn hateful speech and hateful messages. But it's also extremely important for economic reasons, for reasons that pertain to the typical subjects that are seen before this body. Audrey and Phil mentioned it, but for someone who's coming to this town looking to buy a home, and we want people to come invest in this town by purchasing a home, by starting a business, they want to know that there's a tolerant, open society they're coming into. And for the most part, by far, far and away, I've seen in Walpole, there's love, there's acceptance of everyone. It's beneficial to this town to send this message, to have this posted in Town Hall. It's going to matter to people who worry about the events in Charlottesville and whether they could bleed over into Massachusetts. They're going to see that resolution having passed, having been written about in the news, and that matters. Even if it's just one person, that matters for this town. So I wholeheartedly support it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, to Phil, I had a timely discussion with my daughter last night. I didn't realize I had read your article, and I knew you were going to be coming, but she really put me in my place. She's a high school teacher here in Walpole. And first of all, I didn't interpret a conversation she was having with her twin sister, who was also a teacher, but in Norwood. And they were telling me that there was a larger number of people of color at Walpole High than I ever thought, not just through the METCO program, but through other programs. And the discussion turned around to our president and some of the stuff that went on yesterday at the sporting events. And I didn't really enter into too much of a discussion with her because they were so passionate about the fact that we need to do basically what you people are saying. I didn't realize that the school principal, Mr. Ambush, will immediately suspend anybody who uses the N-word or anything. And I said, well, who uses that? And they said, you'd be surprised. They hear it every day in the halls there. And I don't think it's a condemnation of the school system. It's some of the kids and their Walpole residents. So they politely put me in my place because, I'm quite a bit older than them, and I really wasn't aware that, first of all, that there's probably a couple of hundred black children up there. But they shouldn't have, it shouldn't matter what color you are or your religion or whatever. People should be treated nicely. And it creates, from what I could tell from my daughter, a lot of hostility and tension. So I think, what Andrew's suggesting, and I got a compliment about that. I don't really know you, or I would like to get to know you. I think Phil referenced that there's a group that's sort of a watchdog. Are we a community that has a lot of hate? Identifiable?
Well, I don't know if there's I didn't see a group mentioned in the Southern Poverty Law Center. However, hatred and racism is pervasive in our society.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who are racist may not think of that. They may say things that they feel are all right to say, and that's why it's so insidious, because they don't realize how hurtful and how harmful it is, and how it continues to have these stereotypes, and how prejudices can impact people's employment and housing, and so I think that's why it's incumbent on all of us to always be speaking out. So I don't know how many hateful groups, and Audrey, you may want to speak about this.
Well, specifically, I think that Walpole until recently has been listed as a town that wasn't welcoming to people of color.
Really?
I have to confirm that, but I do know that, like I said, that there have been certain acts by individuals that have been picked up by the news media about Walpole being less inclusive recently, and I would say, and I think it wasn't until 2 years ago that the Confederate flag flying over the football field was
Absolutely.
so it's a very recent history for Walpole too, but like I said, that's not the, I've gotten, in the past 5 years since I've lived here, I've gotten to know a lot of young families and my neighbors and everyone, and that's not generally the Walpole that I know. It's not a Walpole of hate that I know, and so I think this would be a really great statement for the town to make.
Yeah. I agree with this, and the reason I asked Phil that is I would be devastated if I thought they were known hate groups. I think Mr. Moraski's probably aware of, like on the planning board, there was some negativity towards Sarah Khatib when she was running for the position, and I hated the whole thought that I actually spoke with Sarah, but I don't really see it, but I do know. I mean, I'm 72, I grew up in the 60s, people had certain ideas of life. I mean, whether it's sexual orientation or whatever, I'm trying to adapt, and I think it's good for the community to become more aware. So I think it's a good thing you're doing.
Okay. Thank you, Dick. John?
So apologies first for being late. Thank you for coming and sponsoring this article. I'm just curious if such an article has been placed on other town warrants. Is there any precedence for this? What's the origins of it? And I apologize if you've already covered this ground due to my tardiness.
No, I can speak to that briefly. This language is substantially similar to the one that was passed in by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts by a joint resolution, as well as a proclamation by the governor, Charlie Baker. The message, not this language, was adopted by a joint session of Congress and signed by the President of the United States. The town of Springfield, I know specifically, has adopted substantially similar language. I didn't really have time today to look at the other cities and towns that have adopted substantially similar language, but I can get you that information. But essentially, this language is, for lack of a better term, cut and paste from the state resolution.
So why do you feel it's necessary if the state, the federal government and the state have already authorized this and made it part of their policy? Why is it necessary to also push it down at the local level?
Sure, I can. Well, what I said before was that that this is a chance for Walpole to speak out and to make a statement that it also supports these initiatives and it denounces white nationalism and neo-Nazi behavior. I think that the town of Walpole has had some bad press lately, and the people of Walpole do not necessarily. The people of Walpole don't come across to me as people that are hateful people, but I think that we need to make a statement that the tolerance is appreciated in Walpole and that this behavior is not accepted. And then, you know, all of this is not only good for the people of Walpole, but it's good for businesses that want to come in here. It's good for people that want to move in here. It's good for our children to know that this is a message that we want to pass down to them. It's just generally something that we need to stand up and say as a town, regardless of what the state and federal government
And it's good
do.
for everyone to be speaking out, because as long as people don't speak out, then hate has a place. So the more communities speak out and the more people speak out, the more you stop it. So all towns should be speaking out for this.
Yes, it's true. Yeah, your point about press coverage, however, you know, you can't control the press. So if one was to propose articles and warrants every time there was, you know, less than favorable press coverage, you know, we'd be very busy all the time. So that shouldn't be the primary. You know, I wouldn't think that'd be the primary motivation here to combat what the press has said.
No, I'm sorry. It's not the press. It's the. Sorry, excuse me. It's the press coverage of certain individual behavior in Walpole and what that behavior represents, and that behavior is not representative of the people of Walpole. It's just generally how Walpole is viewed in the public. And frankly, I mean, you know, we want Walpole to be in the news for something good.
And this is something, you know, what happens in Charlesville and what's going on is not just a simple, you know, a small thing. This is a big thing, and just the fact that there are so many other people speaking out shows you that this is important. So
I mean, the mechanics of it is that it'll be posted on the town website and it'll be posted in all the public buildings in the town.
that's right.
And that's it.
That's it.
So
It's
I don't know, is that going to accomplish your objectives? That seems quite benign, and
well, it makes
you'll get
a
picked up
couple
by-
things. One is by having it as an article, it put it in the warrant, so anybody who reads the warrant is going to see it. It also means the town meeting members will see it ahead of time, so it's not something they're just going to come in and see. So our purpose is really to raise this as a personal, as a public issue. So everybody reading it will be aware of it now, that Walpole has made this statement. And we remind all of us to be very diligent when we see racist or hateful things, that we would speak out. And as Audrey said, you know, it's good that Walpole will get will be known as a town that did speak out and did make this statement and is proactive. So it may not seem like a big thing. On the other hand, you know, hatred comes when people say things and nobody responds to it. So it's important, you know, so we have that opportunity to do that.
Susan.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm very pleased to meet you, Audrey, and I know Phil, and I just want to say that I think that this is a wonderful thing that you've done, because I agree that it's important to be proactive and to have the word come out, particularly from the leaders of the town, which would be people in this room, the selectmen, and of course members of town meeting, to go on record to say that this is a community that opposes the kinds of hateful messages that we've been exposed to recently. So I would make a motion for favorable action on this article.
Now, Tom, you had your hand up. Do you have a comment or? Oh, was it?
You go first on this.
Okay, we got Tom, then Ed.
There are two concerns I have with this. Kind of the opposite of your concern, John, what other towns have done it. I've seen too many town meetings devolve into resolutions on everything. So, Brookline has a resolution on pretty much everything, every town meeting. They have 10 of them. And sometimes stuff like articles like this, or the resolution even from the State House or whatever, it's worth what it's printed on. Government agencies do resolutions just to make themselves feel good. And the sentiment behind it I get, but I actually think it's rather narrow, because you have in there just white nationalists, neo-Nazism. I turn on the news and I see all kinds of protests going on that are unacceptable. So if you want to be broad about it, we should just oppose unacceptable behavior. I mean, in Boston, they had some group attempted to have a rally, which apparently no one showed at, which is fine. Rather nice that no one showed at it. But then the people who went there to oppose the people who didn't show up ended up attacking the police. If you're going to do something like this, I'd rather actually see it broader rather than specific as to one group or another. Just say activities or assaults and stuff are unacceptable.
Ed?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, kind of on the same line. I mean, I'm only going to speak for myself, and I don't speak for the board, and I absolutely agree with what you people are trying to do. So let me just make that perfectly clear. I absolutely abhor any of this white nationalist, white supremacist talk. I think it's vile and disgusting. Having said that, the thought that occurred to me, and I don't know if anybody else had the same reaction, I'm wondering if there's going to be any negative reaction. In specifically, would it be within the realm of possibility that outside hate groups could target this town for the very reason that you're placing these placards or prominently in buildings and municipalities on the streets? Have you considered the fact that there could be a negative reaction from those particular groups? And having said that, also, is there a possibility? I mean, if in a hypothetical situation, if a white supremacist group wanted to do a rally in this town, what legal ability would the town have to prevent that type of thing from happening? God forbid.
You want to answer that, Phil?
Do you want us to just respond to that?
If you'd like to, sure.
Yeah.
If the white nationalist group abides by all the permitting requirements set forth by the town, then they should be able to have a rally. This is just, this is not to infringe anyone's freedom of speech.
I understand that, but that's and I understand that, and I agree. I think it's almost too bad that there isn't something that you could enact which would be more encompassing, kind of like what Tom said. Only because, again, I understand the intent of what you people are doing. It's very commendable. But that's not to prohibit somebody from coming in here. And all the hard work that you people have done will be to no avail because, again, God forbid something like that happens. The things that you've done, the things that the town has done, will be of no consequence if something like that happens.
But I think if you look at it the other way, by doing this, if a hate group did come into Walpole,
Right.
then people should be prepared to know to disavow them. And what the Southern Poverty Law Center recommends is not having a protest right where they are and drawing more attention to them. Let them be marginalized off to the side. So if they abide by the law and they get a permit to rally or to have speakers, then let them do that off to the side. But on the other hand, let all of us be united with this resolution and with these statements so that we stand up and disavow them.
I agree
Because
with you.
whether they come here or they come to Springfield or somewhere else, the important thing is that people need to disavow white extremist groups and And,
I
and
absolutely agree with you, and I absolutely understand, but that's not to prohibit, and I know what Tom is alluding to, is for another group to come in and create a situation. I agree with you. I think the way to protest that type of hate speech is to disavow it, minimalize it, but that does not stop other groups from combating that message, and that's something that you really don't have a tremendous amount of control over. That's of course, that's my concern with this whole thing.
And again, I think if people are united on their, again, according to what we're asking
Right.
for here, and want to stand up against these groups and disavow them, no matter where they are, it's a positive thing.
Right.
It's better than having people not make a statement, because it might be there's nothing here, but it may be things are happening in Norwood, and we should be speaking
Sure.
up against it.
Sure.
So, I mean, there's no way to control everything.
Right.
I think the reason about the narrowness of it, it's very oriented towards, one set of events, and it doesn't mean that that's the only thing that we should be addressing, but this is in direct response
Right.
to that particular event, and it's certainly a big step forward, and again, going forward, we can learn about that.
Thank you.
You good? Laura's first. Laura.
Go ahead.
Laura,
You
go.
Understanding that I am not originally from here, so when I moved here, I think we do need to take into account that there is a history in Walpole with the Confederate flag and the issues around it. That I would like to see a proactive step in saying that that we as a town care about our community and care about one another. I also think it's very important, knowing that have done a lot of work with schools, that each school, like be it Burr Middle School, they have core values that they drill into the kids' heads. They have it on the walls, and it's just becomes part every day of their life. Same thing with Old Post Road, and I think this would be one further step for the schools to be able to point to say, this town doesn't stand for what we did 20 years ago, or using that symbol. That I think that I support this specifically for that reason, that we would be a good community member by endorsing and supporting it. Thank you.
I think that's good. I think to get the
You wanna
support
comment
of.
on that?
What's that?
You want to answer that one?
Oh, yeah, I'm next, right? I think it's important to get the support of the legislative body to at least acknowledge what Phil and you're trying to do. I think it makes good, positive sense. I look at it as akin to a mission statement, and corporations have mission statements. I think churches have mission statements. A lot of people do. What it does is it makes an awareness. And I'd agree with Susan and with what you said. I'm glad you brought up that rebel business, because that came up in our conversation last night. And I thought that was a done deal once that person passed away and the flag disappeared. But I guess at the high school, it's still an issue, and people look at it. The people of color who come into this community wonder about it. It's quite a discussion point. And, I didn't know that. Now, I think Sarah's here. Now, I mentioned her earlier. Hi, Sarah. But, I mean, she did nothing to encourage this person just to be stupid. And he made comments, and he was called out on it. And I think that's wrong. I don't think we're tying up anything that's negative, Tom. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I hope we don't have a resolution every year at every meeting. I think that can happen. But I think this is different, considering the time we live in and the way our whole country's going. I support it.
Thanks, Dick. Well, if I could just make a quick comment. I mean, a lot of things that you said, I agree. It's said in the schools. I think it should be said at home. I think it should start there and go into the schools. And if it's something that that the townspeople would agree to and adhere to, that's great. I mean, who doesn't love love, But hateful speech and then how things are interpreted. I mean, I'm not going down the whole flag thing. We'll be here for hours. We talk about that. I mean, I'm originally from Connecticut, when I see the rebel flag, I think of a 71 Dodge Charger, it's orange. So if you know what that means, it's an old TV show. You should know that. But, it's just, that's not the first thing I think of. I don't think of things when it comes to stuff like that, but that's me. You know what I mean? And I think that you should do the right thing. I don't really have a problem with the article personally, but, and I'm an RTM, and I'll be more than happy to support that, but, if without it having teeth, so I can kind of see, Tom's approach, where it's like, okay, you have this proclamation, but I can also see Ed's approach, where it's like, well, hey, here's a town that is really against us. Let's go there. You know what I mean? Are we inviting the bad people? Because I can tell you from doing security and surveillance systems, bad people do bad things. It doesn't matter what you have written on the walls or how very nice you are or how good your community is. So, I'm just kind of in the middle as far as, I like the message, don't get me wrong, but, so. Susan, you want to wrap this up for me?
I wanted to respond to that by saying, if you think about it, a hate group would be less likely to come to a town that had such a resolution.
I would hope so.
They would probably be looking for towns where their message would be well received. And I think that's the way that would play out. Having said that, I don't think you hesitate to pronounce in the public square what is correct and morally right just because some wacko somewhere may come and, want to have a lawful protest. If they do, they do. But that should have nothing to do with this body and the town meeting standing up and being counted on something that really, really matters. And in addition to that, being an inspiration to our children. I think it's important for our children to hear that the grown-ups in this community will not tolerate or listen to this kind of message without objecting to it. And it's a matter of free speech, as much for the other side as this side, but I'd like for us to be louder.
Yeah.
So, again.
I'm not sure I understand how to do this. Quoting Robert's
It's already been
rules.
moved and seconded.
It's already been out there, but how do we draw a conclusion
Well, I'm gonna-
to the discussion?
We have a vote, we have a second, so all those in favor,
You have to reconsider because we already have a vote that was taken.
oh, that's right.
What's
See,
that?
that's why, yeah, we've got him. That's Robert. So we need to,
So wait, do you have to withdraw the motion so
So-
we can put it?
yeah,
Yes.
we have to
have a-
withdraw. Do you withdraw the motion?
So I'll withdraw the motion. Second is withdrawn.
the second?
And then move.
Okay,
Move for reconsideration.
move for reconsideration, seconded. Okay.
Susan and Tom.
Now a
Some
vote on
antics,
that.
I gotta tell you. So we have to vote on reconsider as a.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so, do you guys care if you raise hands or say aye? Anybody?
This is just.
Hands is
Okay.
easier, isn't it?
Hands are easy? Okay. All right, so those in favor of reconsideration, please raise your hands. And it is unanimous. How about that? Okay, that being said, do we have another motion?
Am I allowed to make the motion? Maybe not.
I think you are,
Okay.
because we didn't do anything with it.
Well,
Well, let
Andrew's
Andrew do
awfully
it.
excited. Andrew, talk to me.
Motion for favorable action on.
We have a
Article
motion. Do
28.
we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by
Good.
Laura.
Good job.
Okay. With no further discussion, do we have all those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Abstentions? 2 abstentions. John and Ron. Okay, that being said, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is that right? How many of
10,
us are
1,
here?
2.
Can't be.
10-1-2.
And
Yeah.
then two.
Are there
You want to say go over 29?
Are there 13 people?
And on that note, we get to switch.
12.
So that doesn't, that can't be 10-1-2.
No, that's, we can't
So I
add
was right.
912.
That
They needed to.
All right, you're done.
We're the fight, yeah, that's it, I'm moving.
I'm a
seats.
numbers girl.
I don't get this. I still don't learn.
the count,
Well, it's a bunch of BS. So
I'm just agreeing with you.
Enough said.
All right,
Thank you, Vice Chairman Stas, for filling in.
Yeah, they do.
John,
More
it's all
than,
yours.
More than adequately, I might add, and
We went a little
with a
late,
little
I'm
bit of
sure.
humor
went a little
on the
late, sorry,
side,
guys.
so thank you. All right, moving right along, Article 29, private zoning article. sponsored by L. Barrows. I'm sorry, what does the L stand for? Liz Barrows, okay. And
Hi.
we don't know, I don't know anything about this, so we're all eager to hear what you have to tell us.
Yep, come on up.
Come on up.
Forgive me, I do not participate in town politics, so I'm a little bit new, and I apologize in advance if I offend anybody for not following the right protocols.
Just relax.
Anyhow.
No, you have the floor, and it's your position now to
Thank you.
sponsor the article and tell us what it is and
I appreciate it.
justifications, pros and cons.
So, my name is Liz Barrows. I live in East Walpole, and the reason why I have filed this petition is I'll give you a brief background to why. A applicant has proposed development behind my home, and it's been going through the process with the town through zoning, planning, conservation. So it's really opened my eyes up to a loophole that's in the bylaw.
And just a point of information, does anyone here on the committee have the said articles? I do not and did not obtain them. It'd be helpful to have them, but
Oh, the zoning article?
yes.
Yes. It's 6C,
6C,
4A, and B. So A is in terms of
Were they distributed previous?
No, but it's getting back to like 31.
Where are they?
It's getting back to 31 in the spring, so that's
Okay.
the section of the article.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so it's section 6C, special conditions, and it's number 4, which is the number of buildings per lot, and then A is the residential and B is the commercial. So as it stands, I could read it to you, or I can pass this around and you can read it yourself. As it stands, the short of it is general residence is the only residential districting or zoning that you can build through special permit multiple buildings on one lot. And any other place in town, resident A, resident B, you would not be allowed to do that. They have to follow the rest of the zoning bylaws, which have the table of, you know, side and setbacks and frontage and there's lots of guidelines for the zoning board to base their opinions off of. But for general residents, in this one section of the bylaw, it kind of it eliminates them from having. It says that it just eliminates them. It says that they can, through special permit, put multiple buildings on one lot. So this really was not a problem in the town until a couple of years ago with the project on Eastover, which I don't know, you may or may not know, off of 27. And it's like once that happened, it kind of just opened the floodgates, so to speak. There was just one after another of projects going in just like this. And it's not because it was not there, it's because it was interpreted differently than it had always been by past building commissioners. And now that it's been interpreted a certain way, it needs to stay consistent, and it's going to lend itself to more applicants wanting to do what they want to do behind my home. After watching the town meeting this past spring, you know, I was happy that some compromise was made, and they did put some restrictions by changing the minimum square footage to the 10,000 in a different section of the bylaws. It still is kind of like open territory because of this one section, and I personally don't feel as though it's fair to allow this to happen to just one building zone. This, in my personal opinion, this would never happen in a Residence A or Residence B. I don't think anyone living in having homes in those areas would ever stand for this. And I just think it should be, if the towns, if our master plan, so to speak, whatever is current for town is we want to bring in more business and tax revenue and whatever, then it should be the whole town. It shouldn't be just sectioned to one little area. You know, I understand East Walpole was developed first, and it is more dense than North Walpole and other areas, but I just I feel like we're being singled out, and I think this is going to be taken advantage of by applicants. I think this is going to be a huge problem. There was, just since Eastover, close to me, right off of behind the Big Blue on Pleasant Street by the new Armory, they tried putting in a plan in there. Right behind me, half a mile away, not even. It's going to be a problem. And then also up off of Pinnacle Street, there is my understanding is that they're going to do preliminary subdivision to put 20-something units in there. So I was made aware of this because of my experience, but I do want everyone to know that the application by the developer for behind me, that's already been submitted. I will not gain, I will not benefit from this. The only benefit I will get is knowing that I helped my neighbors, who probably aren't going to spend the time to come here and sit and do this, because who wants to be doing this? I'm sure you probably could think of more places to be than with your families and friends than here on a Monday night. So I felt like it was important for me to, since I've had to go spend all of my time at conservation and zoning and planning board when I have 2 young children at home, just so that I can, you know, appreciate the house that I live in, and not bear witness to what they're trying to do on a dead-end street. It's not appropriate. It's kids that ride bikes and play on Burns Ave. That's not going to be any longer.
Thank you, Liz. So I apologize. Normally we get supporting materials for the articles, and if we don't, you know, it may be incumbent upon the individual members to do some more research and get familiar with the articles. You know, I didn't have a chance to do this. I'm looking at the zoning bylaws as we speak. But to appreciate the gravity of it, do you have any, you know, pictures worth 1,000 words here? I'm not familiar with all these areas that you speak of,
Okay.
so I'm kind of struggling to conceptualize what the impact is. I don't know if you have any illustrations or pictures or diagrams that could help us, you know, appreciate the situation and what we're trying to do here with this. And so that will be helpful.
I wasn't sure that I didn't know that I need to. I can describe the area, East Walpole. You kind of know where that is, right?
Sure.
Generally, East Walpole is mainly general residence district. So the old East Walpole Center, which would be by Magic Scissors and the East Walpole Post Office, 204 Restaurant, near Bird Park area. These are the areas that I'm talking about that are probably mostly general residence districts. And the project behind my home, which this won't affect, that happens to be on Burns Ave, which is parallel to Union Street. It intersects with Pleasant. Excuse me. And it goes out at Dunkin' Donuts on Route 1. So it's area that was all woods. My home has Pickerel Brook running through it, and also Trap Hole Brook. They converge kind of in that woods back there. And so half of the acreage, or not acreage, half of the square footage is protected by conservation. So I think he had 1.5 acres, just shy of that, maybe 100, I think it was 143,000 something square feet. And so he can't build on half of it because of conservation. It's protected by the riverfront, much of it is. The last Springtown meeting, then with those new rules of 10,000 square foot, it's not like the 10,000 is divided amongst the 140, spread out. Only half of it is buildable, so it's condensing it. So although he's fulfilling the 10,000 one building per 10,000, it's all condensed into only half of the land that he has on the
Right.
lot.
And just point of information, did you say he? I'm sorry, who are you referring
I
to?
apologize.
That's
The applicant is Lou Petrosi from Wall Street Development. So this was discussed, for those of you who attended the Springtown meeting, quite extensively, and I watched it back a couple of times. And I'm so appreciative that we did have some parameters, but I just feel like it did not solve the problem. And it was only a Band-Aid to a big problem. And it's every 6 months we're going to be allowing more applicants to get applications in, and I think it should warrant discussion, and I don't know.
Well, thank you. We've got several members with their hands up. I'm just wanna, are we gonna hear from the planning board on this?
So I will say, so I don't know anything about this. Bylaws, it's like reading Greek to me. So I asked,
Human.
I've become very friendly with all of the boards, so that might be the only way that you recognize my face if you watch on your free time the zoning board or the conservation or planning board. I asked Jack, who, as probably most of you know, who is the chairman of the planning board, and since he had to recuse himself for the project behind my home for owning property there and being in a butter, I asked him to provide me guidance on what I could do to end this problem. So if you want to add anything, I would love for him to speak.
And let me just, so, do the committee members want to ask their questions now before Jack speaks? We'll
I
give
have a
you-
question that I want answered before we
Okay.
hear from you.
Sure.
And that is, and again, I don't have the language in front of me, but can you tell me if this were approved and these two sections were deleted, what is the end result? What would happen? What
For
would,
me?
No.
In general.
What would the effect be? In other words, what is it that you're eliminating specifically?
So right now, if someone proposes in general residence multiple units on one lot, they do not have to go through site plan review.
Mm-hmm.
However, if they were to do a larger apartment building, like the Preserve, as I believe someone had mentioned at the spring meeting, that at that point they would have to go through site plan review. This is, and I just feel like that is kind of a scare tactic. That's not really what's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think, you don't need to take a position. All I want to know is, you're saying you want to
It
take the
just-
apple and the orange away.
It just
What's
makes-
left? What does it
doesn't-
mean?
It makes the applicant go through the proper channels and have to have the planning board approve the project and look at it for whether it's a good fit for the town of Walpole.
So it would be treated the way that
All-
residents A and
Yes.
B are right
Correct.
now. It would
Yep.
make it,
Just
it
make
would
the
handle
whole
it the same
even
way.
and yes.
That was, okay. And then my second question was
That's my
really,
understanding of it, at least.
all right, is that I hope some of the people in the room who are town officials will speak to this, because I think it's important to understand from the point of view of those in the trenches, whether they agree with that summation, A, and B, whether they think it's a good idea or not.
So, We've got several other speakers. Do you want to speak, or do we want to hear from Jack? What's your prerogative?
I
Committee
want to
members?
say, if I can address, it's
Of
Liz,
course,
right?
yes, of course. Yep.
First of all, you're ready to run for the planning board, because I think you know a lot.
No, I'm
And-
not.
But you're a lot
Thank
better
you, though.
tuned than you think you are. You've got Jack, who is a good teacher. He's a professor and an attorney, and he'll get you to where you need to go. And I agree with it. I'd like to see the language, though, and I'd like to know if Jack can tell us whether the planning board can make a ruling on this for some advisory information for us. And at that point, I would almost want town council to do the approval. I don't want to get into an Article 31 where it hadn't gone to town council, but I think you did a good job explaining everything. And that's really all I've got. But I think if Jack can answer a couple of those, I'd be okay.
Sure.
you're on.
Ed was next. If you want to speak now, Ed?
Yeah, I think this is more of a question, maybe that Jack is probably a better person to answer the question. It's basically a question regarding special permitting. What's the process to obtain a special permit?
Jack, do you want to come forward? You captured on the mic and so forth. Thank you. Yes.
I guess my question is, how does one define what a special permit is?
Special permit, Mass General laws is, you have to file with either zoning board or the planning board, but the only special permit the planning board does right now is if you're in the area 1, 2, 3 zones, and you're gonna build a building, you do it all at the same time. But typically, the zoning board handles special permits. Special permit's a little bit different because you've gotta file within 65 days, you gotta have the hearing, but you can take forever to make your decision, and you get 90 days after that to issue the decision.
You can move the microphone closer. I'm sorry. I see Peter back there.
Sorry. So, the special permit, but the thing with the special permit is, what we do on the planning board is 1 and 1 is 2. You know, 1 and 2 is not 1, you know what I mean? It's numbers. Where the special permit is, and that's kind of what the zoning board does with the variance. It's more of that, kind of like almost fuzzy math, so to speak. You could have 2 projects looking for the same thing, but one would fit under it a little better than the other. And one of the things that's very hard to grasp, and I'm pretty much a black and white person, is it has to be, like in this case, it has to be in agreement with the neighborhood. So that's it's like colors. You like one color, I like another. That's hard for me, but that's what this special permit does, is these people on the zoning board have to decide, does it blend in with the characteristics of a neighborhood. That's a big key of the special permit. And a special permit you can't get variances from. It's you either get it or you don't. So that's the difference with a special permit.
So has the...
See the language? Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'm just
So
gonna read
have
it.
the zoning bylaws been,
It's just that
has
paragraph.
6C4A and 6C4B, have those been revised from another zoning bylaw? Has the language, I guess my question is, has the language changed in the last 15 to 20 to 30 years?
No, that's the issue, is they got changed in last May there for 10,000 feet.
Right.
The previous...
Previous to that, I guess the question is.
Present building inspector and the previous one, Yanovich, they came up with this interpretation from Jack Me, I can go back to Mary Jane Benka, to David, I can go back, you know.
Right.
Is what it said was, if you wanted to do a similar project down on Burns Ave, I'll make a better statement. Right now, there's a McSherry case that's pending. It's in the courts between the zoning board and McSherry. The building inspector, Dave Norton at the time, made them go get a special permit for multifamily. That's up in Section 5. Then he made him get a special permit under Section 6, and then made him go for a site plan approval with us. The one on Burns Ave, he doesn't need a site plan for us, and he doesn't need a special permit for having more than, for multifamilies in a general residence. He only goes to Section 6, and that is a problem, because we're in a lawsuit right now over that. That's one of the contentions of it. And it was a matter of interpretations. The previous ones were, if you wanted to build what he wanted in East Walpole, okay. If I just want to do a 2-family in East Walpole, I gotta go to Section 5, I gotta go in front of them for a special permit, the zoning board. And if it's over 3 units, and I'm gonna put a driveway in, I get this site plan from the planning board. Well, because it all said over 3 units, it's now interpreted, and what they're doing down on Burns Ave is he's doing 14 individual units, and he's saying, that ain't over, and that's the interpretation of the building inspector. Same thing happened over here at the bottom of Clapp Street on Stone, 3 units, right under the radar. And the problem with that is we're having interpretation problems and legal problems, and that's probably, you know, when Liz asked about this, if you just look at when you just wipe it out, you're not taking anybody's rights away. Oh, yes, and here's the biggest problem, and the zoning board, who won't necessarily speak to it because they typically don't, is they're all under the section 6. So now you don't have the setbacks. Now the developer can do anything he wants, and the zoning board has to figure, they don't have a rule book. If you come to us, all right, you're gonna be 30-foot setback from the back, 30 foot from the front. I think it's 15 on the side in general residence. They don't have that. All they have is what they feel within the special permit itself. And that's a problem they have, and that's gonna set up, I see later on the road, particular legal issues, is we gave it to him, you didn't give it to me. And you don't want that. This is where a site plan is going. You want 1 and 1 is 2. So based on what Liz has proposed here, you take it out, nothing happens. You just stay up there, you do a special permit for the multifamily, like always, and then you do a site plan. Why multiple buildings? If you really read it, it says if you want to do multiple buildings in a general residence, okay, you're allowed to do that anyway. But now, that's the way everybody's interpreting, we're getting ourselves in a lot of trouble like that. And interpretations, like Dave Norton's interpretation, the single one was like, Dave, I view it as it's 1 lot with 14 buildings. He said, no, they're 14 individuals. So everybody, it's this, and you eliminate the site plan. The biggest thing by eliminating the site plan is the zoning board has no guidance. Once again, I'm repeating myself. They have no guidance on the rule book. It's all in section 6, and it's what they feel or what they think. And the other problem for a developer too is he doesn't even know where to start. You throw your hat in the ring and you see, do they like it or not? As opposed to, if the zoning board doesn't like it, he has no guidance. With us, he's 31 feet. I may not like the project, but I got to give it to you, and that's why it's going to avoid a lot of problems. If you wipe them, even the commercial end, it just says if you have more than 1, as long as they meet the criteria. Here's another problem with the commercial one, is you could do something like the mall again and put those individual buildings out there. And based upon this interpretation, they'd never come in front of site plan. There'd be 1 special permit in front of the zoning board, and they have the zoning board doing site plan, which, you know, 25 years ago they did, but they don't now. So, with all that being said, it's just trying to, you actually make it, it's funny, McSherry had to do 3, and the Petrozzi one is doing just 1. And it's trying to keep everything out. So, planning board does site plan, zoning board does special permits. We've worked like that for years, so it does pretty good. Just what Liz proposed, in my opinion, just gonna just knock it out. There's no more confusion.
Thank you, Jack. So we've got several people. Paul, you were next on the list, then Andrew, then Dick.
So real quick, not to repeat everything you said, Jack, but I'm looking at 6C4A, and you're right, it's number of buildings per lot. They're allowed 1 unless they get a special permit. So my question is, and forgive my ignorance because I don't speak Greek either, but if you just eliminate this whole section, so now we're not stating anything as far as how many numbers of buildings. So now as a builder, what do they do? What if they, well, you said it used to be not more than 1. I want to put 2. I want to put 3. So what prevents the builder from doing that? Where's the guy? Because I haven't read the rest of the zoning. You know all this stuff. So
okay, there's nothing.
Where's the ammunition or the holdback to say, hey, guy, you know what, you can't? Or am I looking at the wrong zoning?
No. It's all it's telling you is except where specifically provided elsewhere in all residential districts, not more than 1 principal building can be constructed or so used on a lot. However, in a general residence, the Board of Appeal may allow more than 1 building on a lot where the applicant is shown via special permit. You're still allowed to do more than 1. There's nothing preventing you anywhere in this book from doing that. All this is saying, if you're gonna do more, it's funny, more than one, it's more than 3 now. So now it's, you can still do it, but you just don't have to do, you don't come to section 6 where it says special permit. It's the same thing in commercial. There's nothing prohibiting you from doing that.
Okay.
Good.
I'm good.
All right,
Andrew.
So my question, I guess, is for Liz, and then I have one question, or maybe two for Jack. Why doesn't your petition extend the special permit process to all residential zoning districts? And if it, because I'm trying to understand this, and forgive me for being a neophyte on these issues. Is your objection that there's a discrimination among different zoning districts? As in, like, why is it general residence has this special permit, but other areas doesn't? Or is your objection just the fact that it allows multiple buildings on a single lot?
I would say that first.
Okay.
Former is
So-
my concern. It's not equal. What's proposed behind my home would not be allowed.
So why not extend it to all zoning districts? Residential zoning districts.
I would think that if we looked at the town's master plan or whatever we call it, I don't think that that's typically, historically, how the town has wanted to go. We haven't wanted to be a Norwood. We've wanted to be a Walpole, and
So that's
I
the
thought-
issue, right?
yeah, I mean, me personally, I would be fine, if it's going to be multiple units, multiple dwellings on one lot for all residents and all districts. If that's what the town felt was the right thing to do for our fiscally and for our budget, then so be it. But it's not that. It's just for a certain small group.
Well, so that always means my question for Jack. So you said that multiple buildings in a GR, you can do it anyway. It just won't go through the process allowed in the special permitting process.
That's part of it. That's part 1. But part 2 is if you now drop down, I do 5's up here, 6 is down here, you drop down to 6. You never go back to 5 for all the zoning setbacks. That's entirely limited. You're just under section 6. So it's up to the zoning board to decide what's the right frontage, or not frontage, but setbacks and so on. By eliminating this, now you've got to conform to what we have in the rules and regulations and the tables anyway. You know, you got 15,000 feet for the first one, you got your setbacks and so on, just like every other lot in general residence.
So because of these extra requirements, would you say in your judgment, knowing this far more than I would, that if we pass this Article 29, scrap these 2 bylaw clauses, would this cause fewer developments of multiple buildings on a single lot? Because they would have to go through the 5 process and not the 6 special permit?
No, would it stop? No. No, what it would do very simply is give the developer knowing what they're up against, and they come in front of the planning board for site plan. And they have a rule book. The zoning board doesn't have to think, if they like you, they'll give you 2-foot setback. Ed, probably 60 feet. You know, that's the way it can be, because they can pick and choose what they want. 70 feet maybe, Ed. But that's the way they'll pick and choose. This way, we're locked to the square foots, we're locked to numbers. And the zoning board hears it on, is this good for the neighborhood? And typically, a general residence allowed more than one residence anyway, so they hear it if it's in harmony with the neighborhood. So the biggest thing...
It takes away a degree of ambiguity and subjectivity in these developments. It forces everyone to play by the same rules, the same setbacks, the same requirements, instead of this gray area, special permit.
Well, and if you think of it as right now, we have 2 extreme cases. One guy's got 2 special permits and a site plan, other guy's just got 1. And this one's in court, so...
Yeah, so the one he's referring to, McSherry, which is half a mile from me, it's a problem financially for the town. Lawsuits for ambiguity and not applying the bylaw to applicants equally. It's whether or not it's that way, it's perceived that way.
I think if you're a developer, you always want to know what you're up against. So you read the book, right, Tom? You do this, you know exactly what you're up against, and that's all it is. When you're under Section 6 is, I cut them off today at the light, that guy in the zoning board. I'm done. I mean, that's the way special permits can work. It's a matter of how you feel as opposed to black and white.
Okay, we'll keep it moving. Dick, you were next.
Yeah,
And we've got
uh,
Susan, Mark, and Joe Borowski.
Okay. Hi, Jack. I think this is something that I think I agree with them on, because I do feel that the zoning board should not be the authority that takes away the planning function and the power of the planning board. And what I don't know, Jack, is in the 7 years I was there with you, I learned a lot. I don't recall us having any of those really start to come up until Yankovic did the interpretation for Eastover. And I think this one I told the group, I had actually opened that meeting, and Jack was not there that night. The next meeting,
Yeah.
they were like, haha, we got it taken care of. And I think we want to close those kind of loops. What is the McSherry?
McSherry is on Pleasant Street, right before you get to the Norwood line, next to the ammo
Oh,
place.
okay.
There was like 9 units there.
One
And
partly in Norwood.
yes, yeah, there's a little piece in Norwood, and he was turned down by the zoning board. He came to the planning board, he got his approval from the planning board, because what he did, all the numbers made sense. He did everything he had to. Went to the zoning board on the special permit, they just said no. And it wasn't even under this, the section 5 was under section 6, and they said no. And so now, right now, they're in litigation over that. The problem you have is, I know the attorney who's doing it is now they're just gonna turn over, Eastover only had 1. And then we have Wall Street, the end of Burns only had 1. And they're gonna come back and it's like,
No, I understand that, Jack. Now, what does this do to the big projects downtown? Because I did watch one meeting where it seemed like the ZBA just flashed out any permit they wanted, and they got parking waivers and all these
now
other.
the central business district is, that's where all those were done, Dick.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I think Joe's article wants to put a moratorium on it, on the central business, but this is all just general residence.
Okay. But again, it's the zoning board exerting quite a bit of power over a department that's elected. They're appointed. And I think we should be cognizant of that electability part, and I think I would be in favor. She's still a good candidate. I'll be her campaign manager.
Right, very good. Susan?
So, now that I've listened to the two of you and I understand a little bit better on top of the spring town meeting and all the discussion there, it seems to me that you'd accomplish three things. One, you'd have parity between and among residents A, B, and the general. You would also have less subjectivity, which I think is what your point is. Where you have subjectivity, you really don't know what you're going to end up with. So it's adding an element of uncertainty both for the developer but also for the town and the abutters, because there aren't standards or the same kinds of standards that objectively are applied through planning, and I would be in favor of that because I think standards are good. And finally, and thirdly, I would support this because I think you do open yourself up for legal challenge when it appears that a town is acting in a way that's not even-handed or is not objectively defensible because it's okay here but not okay there. I think even if we would prevail, it still costs us money to litigate. So I think you would reduce litigation by having an objective standard. So for all those three reasons, I would be in favor of this. I think it would be a good change.
Thank you, Susan. Mark?
Does this effectively void Article 31 from this past spring?
No. Actually, it's all right with 10,000 square feet. It says it right there, so that's fine. It's.
Because I know it was kind of like built off of these two, but I wasn't sure if they could stand alone, or if these two are now, by deleting them, impact.
If I have the 10,000 square feet, you can leave it in there. There's another part that says if you're gonna do, just say a single, apartment of 10 units, you'd have to have 10,000 square feet, so it's not gonna affect it. Actually, the 10,000 actually tried to get it close to what, if you did one big unit, so.
Joe, would you like to address the committee? We'll just ask you to limit your comments to 5 minutes, if you don't mind.
See you tomorrow.
He's a stickler about that.
Well, as a lot of you know, because you're RTM members, this, Mrs. Barros's article emanated from the so-called Article 31, which was at the spring annual town meeting. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands what happened at Article 31, which caused all of this to happen. And if you recall, it was the second session of that spring annual town meeting when some people would call it...
Point of information, can you move the microphone closer?
Some people would call it chaotic, and I don't call it chaotic in the least bit. And I stand by what I did with Mr. Hassenjager in trying to negotiate a settlement. And what happened was, it appeared that Article 31 was going to go down in flames. And then we had a negotiated settlement, and contrary to what some people believe, there was a lot of town council input. There was a lot of discussion between town council and the building commissioner who disagreed on some of the language, and we had to get those two people together in order to agree on the language, because we didn't want to have a problem coming out of that with new language and then have a more disagreement. So, but then came that third session Monday, and then all of a sudden 2 RTM members, if you will recall, try to remand Article 31 back to the planning board just out of the blue. And that's when I pulled out of my pocket this very same article that I obtained from the town clerk's office this morning, which was to eliminate this section in its entirety. But what I was trying to eliminate was 6C4A. I was not trying to eliminate 6C4B, which is in Mrs. Barros's article. 6C4A pertains to residential. That's Mrs. Barros's problem. That's the problem that all these people in the GR zone are having. And that is a legitimate problem, as you heard earlier, and for the reasons so stated. And it is causing us a lot of money legally as we go through all these developments and the questions that these problems give us. But 6C4B has never been discussed by, or never has presented a problem to the best of my knowledge and belief. And that pertains to commercial mixed use. It's more than one dwelling on a lot in all commercial zones. So while it's good that Mrs. Barros has brought this back up and resurrected it again, we need, and probably it might sort of work its way down when we get to the planning board public hearing, we need to address whether or not we want to also get rid of 6C3-4B, because I'm not aware of anything that pertains to problems with more than one dwelling on a lot in commercial zones. So we're going to have to address that. So my recommendation to maybe the Finance Committee, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you might want to continue to have a recommendation at town meeting until maybe after the public hearing, and maybe until after we sort of address 6C3-4B and the commercial side of it. There's no doubt in my mind that 6C3-4A, I'm very sympathetic to the elimination of that section. This is causing us a lot of legal...
Point of information, you keep mentioning 3, but I don't believe there is a 3, Joe, right? It's 6C-4-B, just to be...
A and B.
Well,
to be
it's
exact.
6C, I don't have my
4B.
bylaw with me.
4B.
4D. Right, but it's, if you look at the bylaw, there's a 3 in there somewhere.
Well, I have it open.
3A and B.
I have it open. There
Is it, maybe?
3 is
Okay,
determination.
Yeah,
I
just
see what I
4.
did. Right, you're right.
Just to
on
be
that.
clear.
It's 6C4A,
A
and B.
and
which is
4
what should be eliminated.
and 4B.
But 4B needs to be discussed further, because that's not really the problem right now, as far as I know. And what I don't want to see happen is we are losing so much commercial space and business property, that I don't want to see people using that as an argument against Mrs. Barros's article at town meeting.
So if I may, Ms. Barrows, was it your intent to delete both sections?
I thought about not putting that in,
Yeah.
but I was kind of under the gun to get it done before my deadline to get it, and since I don't have any experience or knowledge about the commercial, I added it, and knowing that clearly articles can be changed based upon feedback from the board, so that was not as important to me. It was more of just like add it in and see what people who have experience with this have to say.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, this board, I think, can make amended motions or substitute motions, as can town meeting. Mr. Marowski makes some valid points in terms of the debate and the merits behind section, B, which are valid. So, Susan?
Yeah, I actually crossed my mind when I saw the word commercial. So my question really is through you to Jack. So do you have an issue with B as well as with A?
Well, the only issue, and we haven't had any of these. The only issue I have is the fact that it's like we're going to end up in the zoning board, but more importantly is the interpretation. We're going to end up with more legal.
So it's the same complaint that it's subject to, it's a subjective standard going through zoning, whereas in your view, it's preferable to go through planning where there are objective standards which would be applied.
Yeah, I don't believe this would be an issue, but I'm sure town council will tell me different. It says commercial mixed use, and the only commercial mixed use we have is the central business district, because that is a commercial mixed use. But when Liz proposed it, I said, no, that's fine, because I'm just trying to eliminate this interpretation. And I thought maybe, sure, get rid of that too. I didn't see a problem with it going. Joe's talking something different. Maybe there is, but as far as I'm concerned, that's my main goal. We haven't had experience on this, but I don't want to happen. The thing that crossed my mind was the Walpole Mall when they did their expansion. Had they decided they're going to put in Five Guys and they're going to put in, Taco Bell, they could have kind of fallen under that and they would have skirted by site plan. But we haven't had that issue yet. I will say that when they did McSherry, they didn't have too much of a problem doing it. It's not a bigger deal, but when you cut out the middleman, so to speak, with the planning board and go right to it, that's when this all became a big issue. And sitting there and seeing the people, and all of a sudden it get brought up, I'm saying, wow, I can see why there's an issue for these people. And that's kind of just, I want to get rid of ambiguities.
But if I may, this 6C4B doesn't say anything about a special permitting process.
Wow.
As opposed to the preceding sections.
It's under the section of special conditions.
The only hesitation.
Not really. It's just, this whole section is number of buildings per lot.
Right, but if you go up to the section 6C, it's on page 43, it's entitled special conditions.
Right, so it sends a mixed message.
That's the problem, and if the building inspector, this is what we're trying to get out from under, so he's not battling us or he's not battling the developer, that's what my feeling is. I had viewed it under a special permit, it could be viewed as that. Now, I haven't heard back from that, but, this is the ambiguities, once again. That's all it's about. I'm not trying to take anything away from commercial. Actually, trying to help them is, they want to know, because if we have a hard time reading it, what are they looking at?
Andrew.
I have a question for Joe and Jack. So help me understand this. The fact that there are multiple lawsuits and multiple developers pursuing projects through the special permitting, 6C4B or 6C4A, does that not indicate that there's a great demand for building multiple buildings on single lots? And then the fact that the home prices in this town are rising, doesn't that support it? And if so, by enacting this article, are we not, and this is my question I raised earlier, would it cause fewer developments? Even though you can do it through the GR, would it cause fewer developments of multiple buildings on a single lot?
Here is what is happening in the GR zone, and I'll use Mrs. Barros's experience as the perfect example. And she should do is come in and show you and show town meeting the plans that were submitted for the 14 houses in this lot. But a developer comes in and they buy a piece of property. It's a small piece of property, maybe even an acre. And then all of a sudden, they're combining neighboring properties and they're going into agreement with other neighbors who don't care that their house gets demolished in the process. So what happens is now they have a bigger piece of property. They may not have frontage, they may not have access to that property, but that's where the problem starts to, or the legal issues start to arise. They start to go, and this is causing us to have to spend a lot of money with town council, because we don't know what the building commissioner is going to say about access. We don't know what he's going to say about the frontage, whether or not they have that. And so we go through this big loop of legal versus building commissioner interpretation versus, you know, input from the different permitting authorities, and it becomes extremely confusing. But what you have is, you don't get that much if you're looking for housing out of this. You may get 14, but what you're getting is houses that are 11 feet apart. That's what you have in a whole neighborhood's backyard. And I want to bring up something that I saw in the Wall Street Journal that I thought was very appropriate for this article. A survey of home shoppers released on August 18th by Taylor Morrison, a national home builder, found that the most important exterior feature of a home is its distance from neighboring houses. So when you put houses that are 11 feet apart, what is that telling us? People are coming to Walpole because they want a backyard. They want to be able to celebrate family get-togethers in their backyard, whether it be barbecues or confirmations or, you know, anything, graduations. But now you have dense development where there was none. It doesn't have to be that way.
Can I just add to Joe's, just 1 second? And this is the point I was thinking of as Joe's talking. Right now, if you live in GR, you can have a single family, you can have a 2 or 3 or whatever, but you have to have a minimum 15,000 square foot lot for a single family. In a 2-family, you'd have to have 20, but you also have to have your setbacks, your side yard, as I said, the backyard, and the front. The way it is now, those don't exist. It's whatever they want to put, and like Joe said, they're just creeping them up. Now, if you lived in a general residence area, everybody's, I'll take, you know, think of any place you go, Union Street, everybody's about the same. You get a mix of 2s, sometimes 3s, and single families. Now, all of a sudden, this one, you have something comes along and it's like, whew, it's not the same character of that whole neighborhood anymore. You've lost that character.
Right. It's not the intent of the bylaws to encourage this stuff. It turns out it's a loophole. So there's always a trade-off between, development and living quarters, but it's certainly not the intent of our zoning laws. The zoning laws, the intent is to make it fair and appropriate for everyone, so they know what the rules are, protect the existing homeowners, the value of the surrounding properties. That's why these things are out there. Some of the reasons why they're out there, and this is a loophole that's being taken advantage of.
Because
and it's not the
developers
intent.
are now counting side yards as if they were frontage. And it's like a layer cake effect. All of a sudden, 10 houses all in a row have the same frontage on the street, as opposed to it's sort of like a masking of what should be a subdivision.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what, it should be a subdivision, but they're not counting it as a subdivision, because if it was a subdivision, they would lose lots. And what amazes me about this is that 3 years ago, or 4, I think it was 3 years ago, and some of you were here, I think, at the time, and I came in as a private citizen, just like Mrs. Barrows, arguing against open space residential development. And I was trying to, because a lot of my neighbors liked the open space concept, I didn't like it in particular, but a lot of them did. I was advocating for them, and I was trying to make it work. And I remember Sue Lawson saying, after I get through with that presentation, and what did it go for, about 2.5 hours at the time, Sue Lawson turned to me and said, "Joe, why don't you just get rid of the section and you'll be a lot better?" You know, when I thought about it, and that's just exactly what is happening here. Why don't you just get rid of this section and we'll be a lot better? And that's what Mrs. Barros is facing.
Thank you. John, did you have any comment?
Yeah, through you, John. To Jack, I think you said that developers can basically put in what they want to put in, but aren't I correct in assuming that the Zoning Board of Appeal has to take some responsibility here? I mean, they're granting a special permit, so they have, if you will, the oversight and the responsibility to make that development be something that is attractive to the neighborhood. So it seems to me as though there's something that's not quite right here, and that maybe, stated bluntly, this is, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but it sounds like this is a struggle between the Board of Appeal and the Planning Board as to what should be put in certain locations. So I wondered if you could address that.
It's definitely not a struggle. If I want to do a 10-unit building, they'd have to come for a special permit under Section 5, and they'd have to come to us on the site plan. If I did 10 individual ones, they just go to the zoning board for special permit. That's the difference.
Right, but the special permit, the planning board has, I'm sorry, the zoning board has discretion to say these buildings need to be more than 11 feet apart. They have that discretion.
They have that, but they also have, well,
I mean, why aren't they doing that?
They have the special permit right now to grant more than two or more units. That's they got right now. So if you want to put it in one building, 10, they got to start there. So they're not getting rid of any of their powers or duties. It's just that you're putting the site plan itself with the 1 and 1 is 2 is with the planning board. But it doesn't make sense if you did one gigantic building, you got to do a site plan. But if you do 10 individuals, you don't. That's where kind of the issue is. And the problem with the special permit, as I was saying, is if they like you, you might go 11 feet. If they don't like you, they might make you 60 feet. They don't even know what they can build, and nor do the neighbors. And that's the thing, is you always like a starting point. And that's all this is trying to do, is create a starting point for people. Rather than, we're not quite sure what we're getting into. So as far as that, and I spoke to a couple of zoning members, and they were happy when the 10,000 went in. They liked some more, because they need guidance too. And it's hard getting up there to say, no, you're going to make it 50, and then the argument breaks out. All we're doing is trying to make it so that they pick up it, okay, there it is. And the other thing with this is by putting it back up there, they now have to conform with every other residential unit in the general residence. So everybody's even. That's all this is doing. We're not trying to make it harder. Matter of fact, it kind of make it a little bit easier or simpler for everybody to understand.
John, just a point of information. I attended some of the zoning board meetings, and the chairman acknowledged that they're predisposed to approve the special permits. So that's their inclination to approve them. They try to shape them and mold them to as best they can, but the reality is, and their charge, as stated by the chairman, is they're predisposed to approve them. So
I hear that. I find that remarkable. It seems to me that that's an abrogation of their responsibility to exercise. I mean, I think I'm guessing that the bylaw was drafted that way at some point intentionally, that this wasn't so much a loophole, that it was drafted with the thought that this board in town would exercise good judgment to create a development that was consistent with the neighborhood. And maybe that's just not worked out, and so that's why we are where we are now.
Well, the way it's explained to me is, years back, is if you want to do multiple buildings, this was an add to it. If you want to do one gigantic building, that's fine. But now you want to do individuals, we're going to make you jump another hoop. And this is the other hoop. But now this hoop is now being interpreted by our building officials as, this is all the hoop you have to do. Forget the other two. And that's kind of how it all, if you read it, it's kind of like that. It says if you're going to do more than one building or whatever. So that's kind of was like a second hoop they wanted to have you go through. For what reason, I guess. But and that had been, as long as I've been around, we've been conforming that forever. I mean, I don't know if you go all the way back to Royal Crest, But a lot of these have been like that, so everybody's doing it. Matter of fact, I mean, McSherry's a perfect example, is that was done, 1, 2, and 3, so.
Just to add to that, on the special permits with the ZBA, your supermajority, you need 4 out of 5 votes. So you have a hurdle to get over. And the McSherry is under appeal, I believe, still under appeal, because they only got 3 votes. The vote was 3-2 to approve, but it didn't get the 4th vote. So what happens to that with that appeal, I guess, is still has not been decided.
Thanks, John. So, Dick.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, through you to Jack and Joe and Liz, what's troublesome to me is I'm definitely in support of what you're trying to do. I just have to try to grasp all the information that's here. I don't know what Joe's advocating for. Do you want to push ahead with Liz's petition, or do you want to pull it and try to put everything together for the spring like you mentioned? But I'm not sure.
No, not the spring. I'm not interested in the spring. I'm always interested in protecting the neighbors now. And that's what I did with Article 31 last spring. I hung in there as long as I could to get a negotiated settlement with Mr. Hassenjager. The problem is now going forward at the fall annual town meeting, Mr. Hassenjager or others may get up and say, hey, wait a minute, you had a negotiated settlement, Mrs. Barrows. Why don't we let the negotiated settlement see how it plays out? But the problem is, it's never going to play out. We know it's not going to play out. We know that more of this is going to come down the line, and more of this is going to cause us legal issues, because every time we go through one of these situations, we always have to go back to town council and define that particular situation. So we need to clip this. This is just like that open space residential development. There was a lot of loopholes, and just to tell you, we're still dealing with the open space residential development. We had a stack of papers like this going through cleanup process of what happened up in the last open space residential development. It's still not resolved. So this is what's going to happen here. We're never going to clean it up unless we clip it and get it off the books.
Joe, I agree with everything you said. I thought you had said something about yours maybe in the spring. I understand doing it quickly, but are you prepared to keep, everything can't be a rush. I think that's how we get ourselves into a mess. And I'm very supportive of what you're trying to do. The thing that I've discovered is, you get 15 people here. We have bits and pieces. I have a little more knowledge than some. Jack's got a lot. Joe's learning it. There are developers that create these problems who full-time work on it because they got skin in the game. And that's what's happened up at the open space, I believe, because I was there for that. And it never gets fixed. So what they're trying to do is right. I just want to be able to understand where we're going. What all
the only 2 issues I see going forward deals with the negotiated settlement, which I think can be explained at town meeting, and the other thing, and the other aspect, which is, do you want to apply this to the commercial zone? And I think those are easy fixes. We have an outstanding community director with Liz Dennehy, planner, and she is capable of addressing these 2 issues, which I have no problem with for the fall annual town meeting. We just have to figure out how to do it.
So just point of interest, we do have vote on record recommended action at town meeting.
Right.
So we do have the latitude to not have to take a vote.
I was going to make a suggestion.
Yeah.
That we pay attention to what happens on October 5th. There's going to be a planning board's holding a public meeting on this. And then we could meet before a public hearing. And by then we would have the information, which I think we do need to have, their input. And I'd actually like to have the language in front of me.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with that.
And then we could have a reconsideration and a vote then. Be my suggestion.
Yeah, makes sense to me. We do need a motion?
We want it after or before?
After the
No, I know, after their hearing.
Oh,
There's before, right before
Right
ours.
before.
No, 7 o'clock.
I think that's good, Susan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
I appreciate it.
So, Joe, you're gonna.
All right, let's,
ask a
so let's
question?
move on to Article 2, budget adjustments.
So will you be providing a vote prior to town meeting? Is that what you said?
Yes, yes, we make public.
So the
well, we'll
RTMs
certainly make public
are made
town
aware of
meeting
it?
vote, but before that, the goal is to vote just prior to the Finance Committee public hearing, which is, and when the date, October 7th?
October 12th at 7.
Okay. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you very much.
See, they were in violation. They didn't
Back
post
to
the
Article 2.
meeting.
There are a number of budget transfers, many of which we've already spoken about and I believe approved in theory. The one change and amendment has to do with the fire department and the additional funds required to apply for the safety and survival grant. So this would increase the budget adjustment by $9,256. And we talked about this briefly last time or at a prior meeting, but wanted time to study it and hear from the chief and have any additional debate on it tonight.
Seems pretty straight. Congrats on the grant.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to publicly state that Deputy Chief Paul Barry is the one that actually wrote the grant and deserves a lot of credit for us getting that, so I just want that out there.
It's now on YouTube land.
I'll entertain any questions. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's a matching grant that we owe a certain amount for, and
Right, I think the only point that maybe is clarified, so some of the funds are from taxation, 44,000, it appears to 19,300, having to do with the fire department, will be funded from the ambulance reserve receipts.
Which
I think makes sense.
Now, I think we gotta reconsider our
Well,
vote.
actually, I was gonna ask, under our Robert's rules, can we amend a motion that's already been voted without reconsidering the whole motion? We reconsider, okay. And I move to reconsider Article 2?
Second.
Second?
By Susan, she beat you.
Yep. All those in favor of reconsidering Article 2, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's reconsidered.
All right. I did.
I
Susan
second.
second.
So the floor is now open to reconsider the amended, adjusted Article 2 as previously discussed with the updated article in front of us, with the additional funds to apply for the safety and survival grant, increasing the request by $9,300.
Well, there's other adjustments, though. Can we just do the whole thing? 'Cause we can-
Well, we can speak to the other adjustments? Sure.
Well, it's pretty.
Haven't we done that already?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we knew, JJ said,
we already
you know,
discussed these.
because of the
Yeah.
special election, there could be some money there, and then.
Yeah, we
already
just,
talked
sure,
about
yep,
it.
we discussed all that, but, sure, it's,
So-
yep. 27,000 elections, salaries, 5,000 election expense, 7,850 Board of Health salaries, 4,150 Board of Health expense, 10,000 for the fire department expenses, and then 9,300 for the safety and survival grant.
Do we move favorable action on this
Yeah,
total
we
amount?
need a motion?
Move favorable action in the amended article from the sources stated?
Second.
All those in favor of the amended article, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Let the record reflect, unanimous vote.
thank you.
Congratulations, Chief.
Thanks, Chief. All right, I think we got some minutes.
We do.
Minutos.
Minutes of,
August 31.
yep. Minutes of August 31st. Are there any comments or changes? I read the minutes. I have no comments or changes. Anyone else have any updates? There being none, do we have a motion?
Move to accept the minutes of August 31st.
Second.
All those in favor of accepting the minutes of August 31st, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Ron? 1101.
I'm an abstention, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
I was not here for this.
10-02.
1002.
Susan.
2 abstentions.
What were the other ones?
Susan and Ron.
I wasn't here.
I think that concludes the agenda for this evening's Finance Committee meeting. Thank you all.
So our next meeting will be the open hearing, or half an hour before the public hearing?
7 o'clock, October 12th.
October 12th is our next one. Motion to adjourn.
12.
I'll second that.
All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
We are adjourned.
Ready.